The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I'll give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters here for another week here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and brought to you by Emerald Isle Chapel by the Sea, online at eichapel.org. And joining us today is Associate Pastor at Emerald Isle Chapel by the Sea is Robert Cornegy with us, along with Dr. Bob Wilson, the author of Nullifying God, and also Reverend Carl Zarowski from St. Peter's United Methodist Church. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Ben.
Good to have you all here. Let's take a look at our first story today as we have been winding down this week, the tributes to Senator John McCain, who beginning this, we're recording this on Friday, and it was beginning on this day that he's lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. And people will spend, I'm not sure how long that will be, but then I think he's to be buried at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Let's talk a little bit about John McCain, because we know from much of what he has written, and a PJ Media article talks about this. Much of what he had written on his biography talks about his time as a POW. The headline: Prayers, Sermons, and the Apostles' Creed: The Inspiring Story of John McCain's Faith as a POW. And when Senator John McCain passed away on Saturday evening, he saw in person the God to whom he had prayed for 5.5 years in a Vietnamese prison camp. McCain's faith in God sustained him during the darkest parts of his life. The article goes on to talk about, and quotes McCain from his own accounts of that, how he would pray and his faith would get him through. He told People magazine in 1992, "Faith in God, faith in my fellow prisoners, and faith in my country is what kept him going." There were times when he would recite the Apostles' Creed, and he would look for with others and talk about them when they could quietly. And even the story of a guard who came by and loosened his restraints briefly for a period of time, and then came back later and drew a cross in the dirt with his foot, just to let him know. This is an honorable man who was certainly a faithful man during his time of service and that time as a POW. This is also a time, though, where we are, as I've heard in a one commentary from a conservative, a time to honor him, but not necessarily to lionize him, not to build him up more than we should. And certainly we have seen the media do that, build Senator John McCain up. I greatly admired the man. When he ran for president, I thought that he exhibited grace as a person who was running what he knew was going to be a very difficult campaign, obviously, But even in there, you saw some of the sides that could be certainly could be ornery at times. So what do you think? I mean, when we look back, I think we can all be inspired by his faithful service to the country.
Oh, absolutely. And, third generation, and his sons are serving. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just remarkable for that family. You see that in many military families, that's kind of their life's work, multi-generational service to this country, and that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You're serving this country, and that is to be honored in all instances, and that's why we, honor our vets, we honor our, active duty, we honor those that have been involved in that. But then to have been captured and was offered release, and he refused to be released until those that had been captured before him, mm-hmm. had been in there longer, were released. And of course they wouldn't release him. So because of that, he was extra tortured. Mm-hmm. They added more stuff on, and it's fascinating how he was able to survive. So yeah, I mean that's got to change you. You know, that's going to change. That's one of those that you suddenly life becomes a new normal from that point on, and so much of your life references back to that, and we see that in his life that was a key component of much of the compassion. And I mean, he was hawkish when it came to foreign policy and those kind of things.
And probably nobody, including most of the presidents that he served, knew as much about foreign policy or about the military, especially. As he did.
He really was an expert on that. But he also knew that negotiation was a part in that as well. So trying to walk that tight wire.
What will his legacy be?
That balance.
What will his legacy be? Do you guys have a thought on that?
It's etched in my mind. I don't know about any of y'all, but my mind is when he did that thumbs down on the floor and killed the effort to repeal. That's one of those stunning moments when his team, if you will, he turned on his team. That was just incredible.
If you look, I have two different views of John McCain. One, of course, is the person who was in Vietnam. All the things he did there, that is something that is above and beyond. That is definitely a sign of someone who has character. On the other hand, I look at what he did politically back here, and it seems he was called the Maverick.
Right.
And that was because he was usually on the opposing side. He didn't try to work with, rather he almost seemed to work against. He was going to do his own thing regardless of what the consequences were. That doesn't take away from the character of the man who was in Vietnam.
Yeah, I didn't say it did, but I think it was a courageous act to do that.
Yeah.
On the floor of the Senate, you know, to do the thumbs down thing. But it just in terms of the visual. Yeah. You know, of seeing that moment when he did that, and that was phenomenal.
As a Christian, I think that the legacy that he is leaving, in my eyes, is his legacy of faith. I really do, because the things that we do in life, do they matter? Yes, they do. But our faith and our belief matters a whole lot more. And the things that we do that grow out of that faith are the things that really build a legacy. When reading this article, I had never heard the story about him finding the opening words of the Apostles' Creed, scratched into the wall of his cell when he was a prisoner of war. But he saw that, and then he began to recite the creed. And why was he able to do that? Because he had grown up in a church community where that creed was recited over and over and over. And listeners to the show who go to church, and you may wonder, why do we always sing this song? Why do we always say this creed over and over and over? And it's important because then when we find our backs against the wall and we have nowhere to go, we know that creed. And we can pull that up and we can recite it, and it can remind us that there is hope even in the darkness of a cell in the Hanoi Hilton.
Well, and that's Psalm 23 as well, isn't it?
Psalm 23 as well.
Those are those classic creeds and psalms that are the bedrock of our faith, aren't they? When David could cry out, "Yea, though I walk through the valley," I'm sure John McCain and the others there became very intimate with that sentiment that thy rod and thy staff comfort me.
But then look too at the character of the man that was in the cell. Okay, it would be easy for me to pray for destruction of the people who were holding me hostage, to pray for terrible things to happen to them. But he said he never prayed for that. His prayer was, Lord, get me through today. Get me through the next 60 seconds. Give me the strength and the courage to face this, because I know that I'm not alone. Right now, I'm feeling very alone. I can't do this on my own. Lord, I need your help. And that's what he prayed for.
In other words, give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
he did understand that. I don't think there's any question about either his faith or his patriotism. I think when you look back at him politically, you do find that you wonder why he didn't support like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act,
Right.
or that
He was wobbly on abortion too. I mean, personally, he was against it, but he didn't oppose abortion and always voted for funding Planned Parenthood and all of that stuff. And so, those are on the political side. But he became the chaplain, basically, of that little group of prisoners.
Oh yeah, he held worship service.
Yeah, he was because he actually knew
Yeah.
the creeds,
Right.
And so he would lead them in the creeds, and that was fascinating. I didn't know that. That was a fascinating tip.
Yeah, in this article, it mentions how the Vietnamese gave him a King James Bible.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know where that came from. The Red Cross was delivering some things to the Hanoi Hilton, so that could have come that way. But it'd be even a hard time to imagine that now. But this was a man who then, you can't question his patriotism. We might look at his votes. We might look at his political life. But we still honor that he upheld Christ as his Savior. And he looked to God for his comfort. And he looked upon those hills for his relief and his rescue. We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Carl Zarowski, Dr. Bob Wilson, and Reverend Robert Cornegy here on the talk station, and our program brought to you by Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle at eichapel.org. And let's take a look at a very difficult week, and also really a time that has a lot of Catholics questioning a lot of things about Pope Francis. This story surrounds an archbishop who has issued a bombshell letter, accusing Pope Francis of covering up and of knowing and lots of things concerning the sexual escapades of some of the priests and even up to bishops and archbishops levels too, and cardinal as well. So this is a bombshell, as the headline in PJ Media says, and then the headline is Major Archbishop saying Pope Francis covered up sex abuse, must resign. And I can't recall in my lifetime the call for a pope to resign. No. So let's take a look at a little bit of this story. In the PJ Media article, and it's by Deborah Hine, says that Archbishop Carlo Vigano has gone into hiding in fear for his life after accusing the Pope of covering up sexual misconduct in an 11-page letter. The National Catholic Register's Edward Penton reported on the EWTN. Penton is one of several journalists who broke the story about Vigano's letter alleging Pope Francis knew about the sexual abuse charges against the now retired Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Penton reported on the story with new details from the Vatican on Monday. Aldo Maria Valli, a journalist who works for the Italian national television, helped break the story on his blog after Vigano made the shocking revelation in a series of interviews that were arranged at his request. Valli wrote and initially suggested meeting at his office at a nearby bar for the interview, but Vigano objected, and they ended up meeting at his home on several occasions. So, but in this interview, he talks about, Vigano says, I'm 77 years old, and I'm at the end of my life. I do not care about men's judgment. The only judgment that matters is that of the good God. He will ask me what I have done for the Church of Christ, and I want to be able to answer that I have defended and served until the end. After the Archbishop left, Valli said he was tempted to run to his computer and write down revelations. He launched into a long and melancholy monologue about his experiences in the Secretariat of State, the head of the Vatican City governor, and the nuncio in Nigeria and the United States. According to Valli, Vigano spoke almost nonstop, pausing only to take bites of food, and described the events that rendered his wife and daughter speechless at times. What it comes down to is that he says that high-ranking members of the Vatican, high-ranking members, especially in the United States, knew about these sexual misdeeds and covered them up and shuttled the priests around, the bishops around that were involved, and hoping that it would just go away. And that they knew this, and that there had been, that McCarrick, in fact, had molested seminarians. He testified that Pope Francis knew about that. He explains how, where, and when Pope Francis was told of that. That's in the Stream article. As he did in previous abuse cases, Pope Francis did nothing, even siding with the accused. Calls for a pope to resign.
Yep.
I mean, these are coming from a lot of different quarters now. And some point back to Pope Benedict, as this is perhaps one of the reasons he resigned, is that the heat just became too hot, and that this scandal was going to come down.
Yeah. Well, he had when Benedict found out about it and was exposed to it, he brought sanctions against the cardinal,
Right.
McCarrick, and to the point that he lost his position in his seminary, he lost his church position, he could not go out speaking on behalf of the church, and was to live the rest of his life in quietude and penitence, alone. That's what Benedict put on this man. That's some serious stuff. The next stage after that is excommunication from the church. So you must withdraw out of, and now the accusation is that when Francis came in, he removed all of those sanctions from McCarrick. And in fact, elevated him into a chief advisor role to himself. Mm-hmm. And so I've talked to a number of my Catholic friends, and they are still, it's that same old story. The misdeeds of individuals shouldn't turn us away from the faith, because these are the individuals, but they're so disturbed about this.
But when it appears that the institution of the church is covering up those misdeeds,
right,
then it does give the church a black eye.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. If you all right, the two of you are pastors. Okay. If you learned of something going on like this in someone in your church in a leadership position, you wouldn't cover it up.
No.
You wouldn't cover it up. No. The church needs to be a place that people can come and know that they're going to be safe, know that they're going to be valued, know that they're going to be cherished. And if someone who is leading the church helps to kind of sweep those misdeeds under the rug, you've got a serious problem.
Well, these are accusations. It's going to be interesting to see how it proceeds.
He names a lot of names.
He did his homework. It's an 11-page document. So
11-page document that he sent to 5 different individuals.
Right.
And after Pope Francis found out about it, there was one article I read that said Francis was embittered, and I put that in quotes, by the fact that this had been brought forth and not handled internally. But there comes a point where stuff just has to get out.
He says he's 70-some years old. He's not worried about the judgment of man any longer.
Well, and it's also, it isn't as though he just immediately went to the news media.
No.
He tried to work through the proper channels and was constantly rebuffed, put off, and so it came to that point where, according to his conscience, that he had to act. And so, pray for the church, the Catholics, if you have Catholic friends and others, because this really is. I don't know that, because it's exposing something in the priesthood that needs to be exposed. I mean, we're warned about this, aren't we, in Scripture, that everything hidden will be revealed. And so that's literally what's taking place. Now, can the Catholic Church go through another Reformation is the question.
We have not talked as far as sending out articles about this, or we haven't talked about this on this show much at all. Mainly for two reasons. One is that we're not Catholic, and the other is that it's always a very difficult thing to find out what was going on inside from an outside position. On a very cloistered, and using that word purposely, cloistered situation. But here is the one who is on the inside and could talk about it. Because I have to wonder how much Pope Benedict, we think about transitions in government, how much Pope Benedict told Pope Francis about why he chastened McCarrick that way. That we don't know. We don't know if it was revealed, if he knew what he knew and when he knew it, to use the Watergate phrase.
But now we are living in a society that no longer practices forgiveness.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm certainly not justifying, if the Pope has covered this, I'm not justifying that at all. I'm not saying that, if he comes clean, then we should let him remain the Pope. Okay, I'm not saying that either. But I'm thinking in terms of, look at what happened at Penn State. Okay, Joe Paterno was hailed as an almost godlike figure for a lot of people whose religion was Nittany Lion football. And when it came to be known that he knew things were going on and he didn't do anything, his statue was removed. Okay, it's like he just doesn't even exist anymore in our eyes, and I can see that happening to the Pope here, and it's going to be very difficult for whoever the next Pope is to steady the boat, because right now the boat is a rocking, the waves are crashing into it, the waves are coming over the side. And whoever comes in next as Pope is going to have a lot of work to do.
Vigano spoke about a cabal of pro-gay clerics who are in the Vatican.
And he tied that to Benedict.
Right.
Like you were implying earlier, that there was something associated. That's very rare to have a Pope basically retire. I mean, the only time they retire is when they die.
Right. Well,
so for him to be the formerly known as
still living with that title, actually. So, but
it's hard for me because I came into the Catholic Church, and the church for the first number of years that we were there, both my wife and I, she was a lifelong Catholic at that point, fed me Jesus Christ in a way that has formed a foundation that is unshakable today. I knew priests, good priests, wonderful saintly priests who preached beautifully, and it just appalls me that this should happen to that, because there's so much possible good there, but what needs a thorough cleansing from top to bottom, as well as repentance. You were saying,
and what Robert, you were saying too, is that our prayers we need to pray.
Cover them in prayer.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thank you for joining us here on Faith Matters as we take a look at some other subjects for today. And this one comes from a commentary that is from Dennis Prager, who is also a radio host. And you've seen him probably, he's filled in for other people, but he also has his own radio show and frequent commentator. And this comes out of the Daily Signal, which is a heritage.org website. Dennis Prager writing let's see, one of the most important books of the 20th century remains a bestseller 59 years after it's first published, is Man's Searching for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Marx saw man's primary drive as economic, and Freud saw it as sex, but Frankl believed, correctly in my opinion, that the greatest drive of man is meaning. One can be poor and chaste and still be happy, but one cannot be bereft of meaning and be happy, no matter how rich or how sexually fulfilled one may be. His commentary is titled Leftism as a Secular Religion. And so he goes on to talk about how the great provider of meaning for the vast majority has been religion. Talking about in the West, about both Christianity and Judaism and its power to help motivate a people, help to drive people, and then also talks about the fall of communism. The fall of communism and the awareness of the extent of the communist mass murder and mass enslavement. So what were secular intellectuals to do once communism became the god that failed? So he talks about how secular intellectuals also push back to Christian and or Judeo-Christian or people of any faith, really, for over time. And then with communism being their last bastion of what they believe could be a successful worldview, when that failed, what then would replace it? The answer was to create another left-wing secular religion. And that is what leftism is, a secular meaning giver to supplant Christianity. Left-wing religious expressions include Marxism, communism, socialism, feminism, environmentalism, and probably a few other isms that we haven't even thought of yet. But his idea here, let me just pose this to all of you, is that secularism is waxing as Christianity wanes. As influence of faith has waned, secularism has risen. I think probably we've all talked about it. It's kind of been the main subject of the show probably for a decade. So where do you think, Bob? You seem to be.
Well, the thing that strikes me is that secularism, and a good secularist would look at this and say, we don't believe in religion at all. But what they don't see is they're looking for something St. Augustine said, our hearts are made for none but thee, O Lord, and will not rest till they find rest in thee. Our hearts, made by God, need to find something that is bigger than they are. And that's what gives meaning. Now, in writing Nullifying God, I came across the fact that the evolutionists adamantly deny that it is a dogma. But in fact it is. It's the same thing here, that secularists would deny unequivocally and absolutely that this is a religion. But in fact it is, because they give themselves over to it 100% and say this is what gives our lives meaning. There's a blindness there that they don't acknowledge, recognize, or even consider as a possibility. It's really a very unfortunate thing, but it's also a very disturbing thing, because they will not listen to reason.
The voice of my generation coming up was a musician named Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm, sure.
We cherish.
Changing.
Bob Dylan was a prophet, wasn't he? To us, to those of us who grew up in that time. And, it was amazing, the songs that he wrote. And then, unbelievably, for most of us, Bob Dylan made a proclamation of Christian faith.
Right.
That's right.
He came to Jesus. He was influenced by someone in his group that...
Right, back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And he wrote a song that I've never forgotten. And it was, all of his songs were just so powerful lyrically. And this one was, you gotta serve somebody.
That's right. You gotta serve somebody. Right. I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah.
I remember that well. Mm-hmm.
And that was so prophetic. And Bob Dylan had a gift, has a gift. He's still around. And, he doesn't talk as much about his faith now. He's of Jewish roots. Just like Prager, the guy that wrote this article, is of Jewish roots. But that's fascinating, isn't it? That it ties in with what you were saying, Dr. Bob, that everybody's looking for somebody to serve. And if you don't find somebody, someone outside of yourself, and that's where all the environmentalism and all that, it's bigger than us. This globalism, all of this, that's the biggest thing we got inside the box of creation. To get outside of that box is a step too far for most people. And so they have to find something in the box that they can relate to. And you're going to serve somebody. And, it's just fascinating to hear now this secular humanism was declared a religion back in the 60s. It is a religion. Now, what we have now is postmodernism, but you still have people that are secularist, that are materialist. But now you've got this group coming up, and what's the symbolism of this new group? They have a big event every year out in the desert.
Is this the
Burning Man?
The Burning Man.
Yeah,
this
right.
is their worship. They go there to worship. And what are they worshiping? They have no idea.
Yeah. No.
It's the unknown God, if you will, of the Greeks.
We're talking here about this search for meaning. And, of course, the secularists are not going to listen to anything that the Bible has to say.
No.
But, we see that even in the Scriptures, we have this question of where do we find meaning? You look at the book of Ecclesiastes, and the writer keeps saying, I'm searching for meaning. I looked for it here, and nothing. This was empty. This was empty. This was empty. And comes to this conclusion where he says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments.
Amazing.
That's simple.
It's
Fear
amazing.
God and keep His command. Does that mean to be afraid of God? No, but it means to acknowledge God, acknowledge His sovereignty, acknowledge your need for Him, and that He is much more powerful than you. Acknowledge Him and keep His commandments, and you will find meaning.
I think too that when in the book of Acts, when Paul was in Athens, was it? He was there, and he was looking around, and he found this altar to an unknown God. And he said, okay, I am here today to tell you about the God that you are looking for and worshiping. And even back then, they were looking for something
other than God. Well, the Scripture is real clear that we either serve God or we serve mammon. And for many, mammon is misunderstood. They consider
money.
Just money, but it's not just money. It's really the world system.
Right.
It's the alternative to God, and so you have to choose which one you will serve. God in Deuteronomy, He says, "I've put before you life and blessing, death and cursing. Choose you this day." But He doesn't just then walk away. What does He say?
I think
choose life.
I think Prager is saying, and when he says about all the various isms that are out there, the one that really consolidates them all perhaps is hedonism. And when hedonism is about your own personal pleasure, and I was mentioned to you all in the Babylon Bee that has satirical stuff. They put a new bracelet out that says, "What would Jesus feel?" That this hedonism is about how you feel. It is about making sure that you feel okay. And that all is good. He talks about how for the leftist intellectual, it is that everyone is basically good, whereas we look at it as basically fallen, and that we have to be redeemed. So this is a worldview. That's 180.
Yeah.
And this is to the extent that this is becoming a dominant worldview, is the one that we are most concerned about here.
All right, well, then the question is, what are we doing about it? Agreed. As Christians, as believers, as pastors, as writers, what are we doing about it? I attended a secular funeral for a family member where when they buried the person, somebody put a feather in there in case they needed to fly to get to the other side. Someone else put a ladder in case they needed to climb over a barrier. Someone else put a small boat in the grave with the remains in case they needed to cross water.
Like the Egyptians.
And what was said was, we don't know how this person will get to the other side. And I'm standing there thinking, I have the answer
Yes.
that you're looking for.
Yes.
But did I share it with them that day? No, I did not. My question again, what are we doing about it?
Well, it's a fascinating question, Carl, because we are to give an answer. We are to be prepared. We're to
Peter says
sanctify ourselves in the Lord, right? Get that straight. We're set apart, and that He's given us a message to share. And we are to prepare ourselves to share that message. To anyone who asks for the hope that they see within us. They see us living differently. And they say, what is it that makes you so different? Right. But we're to do it with gentleness and respect, which is the difference between the two worldviews, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Theirs is intolerant. Ours is tolerant. We believe God will straighten it out.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Hey, welcome back here to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Reverend Carl Zarowski, and Dr. Bob Wilson. And let's talk about our sign of the apocalypse for today. And this is a study that's come out now from the Centers for Disease Control. STDs hit record high again. But are more condoms the answer? An interview with abstinence educator Scott Phelps. This is from the Christian Post, writing in Voices, and I think we can provide our own interview here. But sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, have hit an all-time high for the fourth year in a row, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control is sounding familiar refrain. More condoms, more sex ed, more funding. There is no doubt the statistics are alarming. Syphilis increased 76% between 2013 and 2017. Gonorrhea increased 67% and is becoming increasingly resistant to drugs. And chlamydia, something that was almost non-existent in the early 1980s, has become the most common condition reported to the CDC. But can the STD epidemic really be blamed on less condom use and insufficient sex ed? Okay, that's the question asked. And Robert, I think you know from personal experience in the community of trying to help thwart this problem, you know the answer here.
Yeah, I'm president of the board of the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center and have been involved for over 30 years. And this has been a battle that we've been engaged in for beyond that whole period. I mean, it goes way back, and there are two approaches on this, and one is the abstinence, although now we call it sexual risk avoidance. So when you see it written out, often they'll abbreviate it to SRA, sexual risk avoidance, which is abstinence. In other words, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Avoid the risk.
Avoid the risk completely. It's what we teach about drugs, drunk driving, and smoking. We don't say, oh, it's okay, just smoke half a pack instead of a pack a day. We don't say, well, just have one beer instead of two beers. Well,
Have a light beer.
Yeah, have a light beer. No, we don't do that. And those other areas do we. But for some reason, in this area, we tell teenagers that they can go out and have sex, but they need to protect themselves. So that's called sexual risk reduction rather than avoidance. See the difference? And this has become the mantra of the left, of the leftists who have infiltrated our social services programs nationally as well as in the states. We're in a battle right now in North Carolina. We have a progressive governor, and we had a conservative governor before that. Positions were put in place during that conservative governor's term that are now being reversed by the progressive governor, and particularly in this area of sex education. And they're pushing for their theory is that if we can get all these kids using condoms or some other kind of contraceptive, that will reduce the rate. For 14 years, we had a program in the public high schools and middle schools in Carteret County called Lifeguard. Lifeguard was taught in the middle school and in the high school, and it was a health module. And we had trained teachers, instructors going in, and we saw the teen pregnancy and the STD rates dramatically decreasing for the 14 years every year that we were involved. 2 years ago, we were invited to leave the school system. And now we're starting to see those trends reversing. I'm telling you, if you tell these kids that they can go out and have sex, if they'll just use a condom, they're going to do one of the two, generally speaking. And it's going to be having sex without condoms or without contraceptive. And then you've got all kinds of problems.
Now,
not only the pregnancy issue, but also the disease issue, as
Right.
the CDC reported.
Right, and Robert, as you know, this is not your program. The Lifeguard program wasn't about just saying don't do it. It was
No.
about making choices.
It was a
about
character development. Think about what you're doing.
really
Don't
a
just-
critical thinking idea.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Look at the consequences of the choices you're making. And these kids were making good choices. Not all of them, but the percentages started falling dramatically when you were telling them you can choose not to do this because they're so pressured by our culture to get involved in sex early. They're told that they have a right to have a healthy sex life in middle and high school.
Yeah,
That's what they're told, and that condom is going to protect them, and it's not.
and social media sites are promoting hookups.
Yes.
You know, just recreational sex.
You know, one of the things about abstinence says that there's a discipline in abstinence. I mean, that for the kids who are there, their sex drive is somewhere way off the chart. But there's a discipline to saying no. There's a discipline for respecting your body, my body, your body, for the boys and the girls. But there's something more than that. By not having open sex wherever they want, whenever they want, under any conditions they want, they now have set themselves up to have a sexually satisfying marriage without thinking about going off and having sex with a whole bunch of other people. I mean, they're setting themselves up in the future for marriage to have restricted abstinence, if you will, from other people. They're going to have sex with their husbands, they're going to have sex with their wives, but they don't have a background of having free sex with whoever they want.
You mean the people that follow abstinence
Yes.
education, right?
This postmodern hedonism, this postmodern worldview, though, lives for the moment without consequence. And
Yeah,
we're
that's
seeing
right.
this. We're seeing this crossing all genres of thought. I mean, so it's not just the sexual, but political and everything else. There's no live for today.
Yeah, and I'm thinking Robert was talking about, drinking. Okay. As a parent, do I want my children to go out and get drunk? No, I don't. Okay, so would I be perfectly content to say, yes, you can go out and you get drunk so long as you have a designated driver, you can get as drunk as you want. That's the same thing as handing a condom to a child.
That's exactly
and saying you can go out and have as much sex as you want so long as you have one of these with you.
Yeah.
And I read this morning about a county school system in near Baltimore that is distributing condoms at like 25 of their high schools this year. And it said, kids go in, they get their pencil, they get their notebook, they get their condom. And they want to expand the program to, I think, 40 high schools and then expand it to the middle schools. And so the schools are
Advocates in this.
advocating it. They are promoting it.
That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Yes.
In North Carolina legislature, a long time ago, this isn't just in this recent legislature, said that the education system for sexual issues in the school system should be to reinforce that sex only happens in a marriage between one man and one woman. That's on the books. That's in the statute.
Oh, but that'll offend somebody.
But
if we
they
teach
are
that.
working around this thing, and there's a group that's called Shift, and Shift is in our state. It's connected. It's been embraced by the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, and although we just had a leadership change, and so we're hoping to see some differences on that. But they are advocating for this condom distribution. That look, and their premise is, it's a false premise. Their premise is that kids are just going to do it anyway.
Right.
So we just may as well let them do it,
Yeah.
and then try to protect them in the process. Well, no. If you show them the consequences of that decision, many of them will not do it. Now, there's always going to be a percentage that'll do it, but you will see a shift. And we have the proof. It works to do abstinence education or risk avoidance education. It absolutely works based on character development. You make your own decisions for your life. Don't be pressured into this. And look at the consequences. What is your future? But we have this problem. They're playing on the weaknesses of this group that they've targeted. And Shift is funded in large part by the federal government and by Planned Parenthood. And so this is opening or enlarging a market for Planned Parenthood, because what does majority of Planned Parenthood's business? Don't believe the stories that they do all these other things. They do some things, but they are an abortion provider, and they do a third of the abortions that are performed in the United States are performed by Planned Parenthood. That's a staggering statistic. One organization.
You would never give out free cigarettes in a school in this day and age.
Of course
right?
not.
Right? You never give out free cigarettes.
Or hand out beer in the parking lot.
Yeah, right. So, but for some reason we cannot, or we're prevented from applying that logic. And again, it goes back to this postmodern idea of no consequences.
That's right.
We cannot tolerate discussion of consequences of actions.
Yeah, I mean, it hits home because just the experience that we had, but this is a national crisis.
Thanks for joining us today on Faith Matters. I'm Ben Ball, pastor of Broad Creek United Methodist Church, Reverend Robert Cornegie, associate pastor, Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, Dr. Bob Wilson, author of Nullifying God, and also Reverend Carl Zarowski from St. Peter's United Methodist Church. And Faith Matters is also brought to you by Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle at eichapel.org.
Trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.